So welcome to another War Game review from theplayersaid.com. My name's Alexander.
And I'm Grant.
And I realise that I've said War Game, but is this really a War Game?
That's a card-driven game.
It is a card-driven game in the Twilight Struggle style.
Yeah.
But it does have the Great War in it. Not a war game. It's not a war game.
It's an abstract, card-driven, historical game.
Okay, so
there you go.
This is Europe in Turmoil, Prelude to the Great War. Not a war game.
So this has made it into our Guns of August event.
Yes.
Because it's the build-up to the Great War. And in fact, you can ultimately end the game with the Great War.
In most games, you will play out the Great War as a huge, like as a world-affecting, basically, event that will significantly change who, like, the victory point standings and what's going to go on.
If you lose that, you're going to be devastated to the point where you're going to lose almost all your control.
Yeah, if you can lose the war and still win this game, good on you.
Yeah, it'd be a miracle.
You've played it really well up until a point, at least. So, who designed this? It was designed by Chris Van
Burden.
Sure. Yeah. Put out by Compass Games. It's a couple of years old, though, right?
I think it was 2018 or 19.
18, 19?
Yep.
I know, yeah.
I did an interview with him, and Chris is a very smart fellow. He's designing another game for Compass it's called Barbarians at the Gates. It's like a Roman.
That sounds cool.
So I think he's a very good designer. He really likes Twilight Struggle, and that's why he wanted to do this game.
Yes.
So he took the model, the framework, and he fit it into the build-up to the Great War. For instance, the space race from Twilight Struggle is
the Naval Arms
Race. Same principle, a little bit different because it has a little more varied ability and varied benefits.
And that's it. The mechanics of how you use it are generally the same.
Yeah.
But yeah, the benefits and effects are very different. And I think it's also bigger. I don't think Twilight Struggle is 10 spaces.
No, I don't believe it is.
And this might even be more than 10. This is a lot of spaces.
It's a lot of spaces. Yeah.
But there's also more opportunities to double tap that as well through other events. And
there are 14 spaces on that card.
Okay.
I just counted them.
That's a lot more than the other one, I think. So, but this is a two-player card-driven game, right?
Yep.
There is a shared deck of cards. There's early war, mid-war, and late war cards.
Yep.
It's
they actually call them, what is it, Victorian?
Yeah, it's Victorian.
Edwardian.
And then the Georgian era.
Yeah.
So it's these three different periods.
But yes, early war, late war, mid-war.
Yes.
Mid-war, late war.
Again, it's very familiar in how it plays. You know, you've got a choice between playing the ops or the events. Some of the events are one-shots. You play them, they go out of the game. Others kind of recycle. There's authoritarian-aligned events. There's liberal-aligned events. And then there's neutral events. And that's really one of the differences in this game is the ideology standpoint. So Twilight Struggle is democracy and communism.
Yep.
This one, it's authoritarianism. So you've got, like, it's Kaiser Wilhelm II, and it's Tsar Nicholas II, and, you know, it's keeping these old European monarchies in place and ruling, like,
with an iron fist.
With an iron fist through, you know, conservative governments and, you know, principalities and things. As opposed to the liberal side of things is going for government reforms, worker stuff. And it's a bit more abstract in the sense that, you know, it can happen anywhere. It's just a different way of thinking outside of that. So it represents the workers and stuff in Russia. Although you'd be hard pressed to say that they were liberal, and that's in an ideological standpoint.
Yeah, but
it's more liberal than what the authoritarianism was. But it's rooted in I don't know, the definitions of the time at least. So, but it's, you know, putting influence into regions, trying to control those regions by having more than your opponent over the threshold of control, and doing that through adjoining spaces, point-to-point movement.
Yep. And
then every so often you'll have region scoring cards. So France has a scoring card. Germany has a scoring card. Russia, Austria, Hungary the Balkans has a scoring card.
Yeah, those are the 5.
And when those pop up, it's the same thing. Do you have a presence in the area? Do you have domination of an area? Do you have control of an area? And then you'll score, you know, graded victory points, and then for the Battleground areas, you'll get extra victory points. And then for these independent adjacent areas that you control, there's also bonus points for that as well. One of the new parts of this game is the stability check. So each player has a deck of 10 cards, and every time you score a region, say, I played the France scoring card, we both pick up our stability deck, and it's 10 cards, and it's not, they're all available to you. So you're going to look through, and you're going to place one face down, you're going to place one face down, and then the person who didn't play the scoring card plays theirs first, and it resolves an effect. And it might be something like, if you control the church, you can add 1 extra point into one of the worker places. Or if you control the government, you can add 2, 1 in each of the farmer places. Something like that. They're ways that can modify things before you do the scoring.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of uncertainty. Or it might be like, if you control the government area, you get an extra 2 points. I think I had something like that. Or it was, if you win this, you can do other things. You get little cool effects that go off.
Well, one of the very powerful ones that I had as the liberal side was I could actually cancel the scoring.
Oh, really?
And
wow.
That was the one that I was reading, and I think I read it 3 or 4 scoring cards in a row, and I was like, no, I'm going to score 1 point there, so I need to hold on to it. And then sure enough, your card would somehow flip things, and I would lose that scoring. So I'm like, I should have canceled it. But that was
you just don't do it.
Here it is right here. If opponent commence scoring and you control an annex space in the scoring region. So you have to control those cross sabers, which there's only maybe 1.
Yeah, there's like 2 in some areas, 1 in most.
End scoring. And place 1 liberal SP in the scoring region.
Wow.
So, to me, end scoring means
it's it. That's absolutely it. You cut it off right then and there. And it says unplayed stability cards remain available. So, if you played that first, my one would just kind of go back to my hand. We're just done. We don't do anything else.
And then that scoring card gets returned to the opponent's hand.
So
I
get it back, and it's the end, so you know it's coming. I have to still play it by the end of the turn.
Yeah.
Could you make someone lose the game that way?
That's a great question, because just like in Twilight Struggle, if you hold on to and don't play a scoring card, you lose the game. So yeah, maybe.
Because if I was playing that as my last action round,
and I had an action,
and you cancelled it, it went back into my hand. I then can't play it.
Then end this action round.
Yeah, so if that was my 7th action round...
Opponent receives an additional action round this turn.
So I always get the capacity to play. You can't make me lose the game that way.
So why would you ever... Okay, sorry, we're kind of diverting.
But
that's maybe the discussion we should have had when we were playing it.
No.
But there are a lot of interesting cards like that in this little stability deck. I think having been our first play, I really didn't like it at first. I felt like, it's just one more thing to do.
Yeah.
I'm unfamiliar with the symbols, what they mean, where they're located. I found it a chore trying to figure out how am I going to use these little cards. I was worrying about a lot of stuff with this game, like you do in these type of games.
Yes.
I felt like that was just one more thing to add to my list of things that I've got to do. Now, as we got on into the game, I started saying, ooh, this is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Because it allows you to potentially, one, completely affect the scoring, which you did deftly.
At least twice. I was like...
Very messed me over. Because both Germany and France, I was going to score more points.
Yes.
You completely flipped that and ended up scoring 3 or 4 points.
Yeah.
And it really changed. So... That's a very cool thing, but also something you got to worry about. You got to plan for it. You got to be aware of.
Yeah, and one, it's like all these games. The first time you play it, you got to iron out the crinkles. There's a learning curve, and I just think it's so interesting how just adding in this little mini 10-card deck into the phase that you added into and the effects on those cards
change the
really significantly changes or can change some of the things that happen.
Yep,
and it's like Kemet, right? You've got to play them all before you get them all back.
Yep.
So, you play that sweet thing, but you're like, next time that scores, I won't have that card,
Yeah.
or I can't use that cool ability elsewhere.
Yep.
So you kind of got to be judicious about that.
Now, I will say on the liberal side, I had several ops cards that allowed me to go into my deck and pull a card back out. So I at least had one, maybe two of those that I saw. So that was kind of, and I never used it because I needed those ops at that time to do different things. But that's something, once again, I might have done differently, and maybe the result. You pretty much handed me my lunch here. you kicked the crap out of me, and I'm usually very good at these games. This one threw me for a loop a little bit. But back to this. I actually really now feel like this stability thing is a very cool element to the game.
I'm always impressed that, like, on the face of it, you're like, yeah, it's a Twilight Struggle clone. I know what I'm getting myself into.
Right.
And to a large extent, it is.
It feels very similar. It has a lot of the same mechanics, and really, you're doing the same things. We always joke. Sorry, I'm interrupting your thought.
It's fine.
We always joke. Take the ops. The events aren't always worth it.
Yes.
Sometimes we get caught up in that, but it feels very different.
Yeah, and I just love that something as simple as the stability cards. That's the little piece of chrome that we're putting onto it.
Yep.
And how much of an impact that it has. I just think it's so neat, and it speaks to the robustness of the actual core engine in the thing.
Yep.
Where, like, it doesn't take much. You add that in. You add in these little crisis rolls. Because the crisis rolls at the beginning of the game, frankly meaningless.
Well, because you have such high negatives, because there's no tension.
Yeah.
The world is not ready to go to war yet.
Yeah.
But as you progress, you get closer, and every alliance you sign, and every card that you end up playing.
All these hilariously weird emergency situations that go on. You're like, the more that happens, the more you're like, oh my gosh, okay. Yeah. Like, all of a sudden, you're like real close to those crisis rolls having a chance of the Great War breaking out. And you're like, oh, I'm not ready for that yet. I gotta get my my Triple Entente in place.
Yep.
I gotta get my Franco-Prussian alliance in place. And you're like, I haven't done that yet, and we're real close to mobilization.
And that's another thing I think. And you actually almost at the end of turn 4, the Great War almost broke out.
Yeah.
You rolled a 6, but there were still a couple of negatives that made it so it didn't. Because you have to get higher than a 6.
You have to roll more than a 6. But
so you rolled a 6, and it was only like negative
and I was sweating.
3 at that time.
Yeah.
But like you said, you have got to take those cards when they come up. There were some times I didn't do my alliances because I'm like, it'll come up later.
Yeah, no, and you can't sleep on some of that stuff.
And what ended up happening, you ended up getting those cards, throwing them away in the naval arms race, and I was unable to get those. So that was a very cool part of the game as well, I thought. You always have in Twilight Struggle, you have the DEFCON track, and you have the ability to instantly lose the game depending on what happens. The Great War is a very similar concept, but it carried out very differently.
Yeah, and it's a little bit more involved, right? If you roll that die and it's more than a 6, the Great War breaks out, and you have to then resolve it. So you look at all of the treaties that you've signed. You get a modifier. You get a modifier for the treaties you've signed.
Yep.
You have a little roll off, and whoever has the highest wins. So it's very abstract, right? That's the whole war is D6 plus the modifiers each.
Yep.
But the consequences of the war are what this game is really about. So, if the Entente loses the war, every country that was part of the Entente, which isn't necessarily like France, Russia, and England, it can be...
It could be totally different because of what treaties...
Depending on what alliances have been formed. So, every country that loses the war, if the Entente loses, they lose a D6 of influence.
Yep.
Then... the authoritarian player loses a D6 of influence.
Yep.
Then the Entente player loses another D6 of influence. So effectively, France is going to lose 2D6 influence, and the authoritarian player is going to lose 2D6 there as well. Or 1D6 there.
Can you imagine if you rolled a 8, 10, 12? You're going to lose almost all your influence, and then the other player's going to
loser, right?
Yeah.
You're getting hosed. The winner, the Central Powers win. Germany is going to add a D6.
Yep.
Then you're going to lose a D6. So, the winners win big, and the losers lose big.
And that's why you made the comment,
Yeah.
if you lose the Great War and somehow still win the game, good on you.
Yeah, because
you have played a masterful game to
Yes.
that point and gotten enough points where you could hold on to the very end.
You were at 19 victory
Amazing.
points before, because that is going to be such a massive swing in control of the areas that as soon as those scoring cards come out again, man, you're going to start getting drained of points.
Yep.
And so in that sense, this is, to me, I don't know, I'm including it in the World War I Guns of August event because it really is such a big focus of this. But the reality is it is still this area influence game as well.
The other thing that we have, Twilight Struggle had no symbols.
Right?
You didn't have types of spaces, worker spaces, farmer spaces.
Yeah, this has a whole
church,
key down there.
Government. There's like 10 or 12 different spaces. All of those spaces play off of cards.
Yeah.
Those cards provide benefits when you control those spaces, or certain cards won't go off unless you control a space. That is very reminiscent of 1989.
Yes, absolutely.
Which has the same concept. I really like that. I enjoyed that in this one. I had a little trouble with the symbols. Some of them to me weren't intuitive. Government, a star, okay, that's not what I would have thought it would have been like a capital.
How many times I mixed up the intellectuals and the workers, because they both have an orange stick. One's a pencil,
and one's
one
a
has
scythe,
a very dark, one has a dark black hammer head at the top, but it's a fairly dark board, and so I'm like, which one's that one?
Yep, but those symbols, once again, that's an added layer of depth. Like the stability minigame is an added layer that you've got to play and build on. We played 1989 a couple of months ago.
Yep.
I love that game. In fact, I think that's, to me, the better follow-up to Twilight Struggle, and I almost like it more than I like Twilight Struggle.
It was extremely good, yeah.
I think I do like it more than I like Twilight Struggle. But this had a lot of that element as well. There's a lot of depth here. You got the same framework, but you add these things that really make it
the extra
very
layer
cool.
of the symbols means there's just more that they did with the cards. It's more, I don't know, this card, you can use it for the ops, or it's a bit more tailored and specific. Instead of being like, place one in like France, it's like, place one
in worker spaces.
Like any worker spaces. You're like, okay.
And remember that word place is so important.
Yeah.
Because this game, like Twilight Struggle, if you control the territory and I want to put influence in there, it costs 2 ops points for every one level of influence. When a card says place, you ignore that.
Yeah.
And I just go in and I put 1.
Yeah, that's your foothold in, and now you're like, get my ops in there to like whoosh.
Yep. And that is always such a very important part of this game. Looking for those cards, trying to get... And it was funny, one of our most contested areas, I think both Paris was very contested and Wilhelm II was very contested.
Yes.
And you can see, if you look at the board, nobody controls those. And we each have 8 in Wilhelm II, and we each have 4 and 3 in Paris. So we fought a little bit over those. I like that. That's a great part of the game.
Yes.
You do the same thing in Twilight Struggle, East and West Germany. The whole game.
East Berlin, you're like, we end up with like 12 in there each, and you're like, we're both idiots.
Yeah, because you just continue fighting over those. Because Europe...
We're both losing this.
Yep. Europe is very important. I think Germany is very important in this game.
Germany and France are like massive.
Lots of points to be had, and you gotta fight over those. The other thing we always talk about with these scoring games where you have those scoring cards, and you said it several times, man, France got played early on in the second deck once the Edwardian era got added in. It got played very early on. It came up. It scored. I think you got 1 or 2 points.
Yeah.
And it's at the bottom of that deck now.
It's the bottom of the discard pile, which means it's not even going back into the deck for another 3
or 4 turns. So we kind of turned our France mind off and said, I don't care about that anymore. And
then we both dogpiled Germany.
It was Germany and Austria-Hungary. And that's the way this game went. And I felt like 1989 was like that as well.
Yeah.
Once a certain area...
focuses.
Yep. And I like that.
Yeah.
And it happens in Twilight Struggle, too.
It does.
Once Europe scores, it's like, I don't have to worry about Europe as much for 3 or 4 turns. But I love that about these kind of games because it now changes the focus and requires me to start thinking in a different way. And that this game actually, I think the more we talk about it, the more I enjoyed it. I got my hat handed to me.
Yes.
I did not enjoy it in that respect.
Sure.
I felt like the cards also. I'm a little suspect on the cards and their balance. But once again, that's an idiotic statement made after
one
3-hour play. And I looked at the different types of cards. There's very different types of cards.
Yes, the events are very, very different.
And I look at the board in the end state, and I'm like, oh, I just think you got the better of it. And it's, I don't know. I think every hand we each had events of each other's. It's just, but yeah. I actually had a really good time with this, and I'd love to play it again because I want to see how balanced it is as we play.
Yes. What I'll do is I'll show you the board and how it functions. If you've played Twilight Struggle, you already know.
Yeah.
And then we'll wrap up with some final thoughts. So here's a look at the map, and as you can see, it is very reminiscent of Twilight Struggle. So the map is a point-to-point movement game, but there's no movement or anything like that. You have these areas that represent geographical regions, and they're connected with these lines, and they're divided up into kind of larger areas. So we have France, which is this kind of blue area here. Then we also have Germany, which is this kind of dark camo, black, brown. Then we have Austria-Hungary, which is this light grey. We have the Balkans, which is this brown down here. And Russia, which is this green. And there's a few kind of independent nations, what they're called. These kind of tan ones that are dotted around, usually in the outskirts as well. So these main ones in the middle of the scoring areas. So I think in the first period it's just Russia and France, come on. And then they add in Germany and Austria-Hungary, and the Balkans comes in later on into the game. But it's very much the case of I'm using my cards to put influence into an area, and if I have, this is the control number, so for the French army it's 4, it's kind of hard to see, Paris is 2. If I have that many more, at least, than the opponent, then I control the area. So the French have, so the authoritarian player has 6, which is 4 more than the French player who has 2. So I'm flipped onto my solid background color, means that I have control over that area. If it's contested, then we're both on this kind of white background side. So that's very much, and it works exactly the same as you would expect to in Twilight Struggle. And what that means is that each turn I'm going to have a hand of 5 or 6 or 7, well, I think it's 7 to 9 cards, I think it's what you can have. And then you can play the card either for the event, in which case you just follow the event card text, or you've got these 3 ops. And you can spend the 3 ops just to put influence out onto the board, or you can attempt some support checks, which is a little bit more random and swingy, but you can get some big payoffs if you're kind of lucky with that, or if you plan those well. So let's take this little 3 card, for example. What can I do with that? Well, I can kind of, if I'm the progressive player, let me see if I've got, let me get the right markers out. Here we go. I can either look at an area like Dijon. I can play into Dijon because before I've started placing any out, I already have some adjacent to it. What you can't do is, I can't, for example, I don't know if there's any good examples anywhere on the board at this point of the game, but you can't just kind of put anywhere. You have to already have kind of been on the way. So, for example, the dual monarchy is connected to Budapest and Vienna, and the liberal player has neither of those occupied by any amount of their support markers. So they can't just put here because it's not connected to anything. And the other thing that you can't do is, I am connected to the Catholic Church, so I could spend like 2 to put 1 in here and then 1 into there. You can't kind of springboard and do that kind of thing either. So what I'm looking at is I'm going to put 2 into Dijon, and it only costs me 2, 1 for each, and then because I have more than the opponent up to the control limit, I control that, and then I've got one more. Maybe I'll just put another one into Switzerland, and that way we can just kind of work towards 5 is a lot. We can work towards kind of getting control of that. That'd be nice. So that's a very simple example. Other examples would be if my opponent controls, e.g. it's on the coloured side of it, if they control this, it costs me 2 to place one into there. So I can place one guy that costs me 2 of my 3 ops. Now that it's uncontrolled, it costs me 1 for each one. So for every one that is uncontrolled, it costs 2 to put in. So it can get very, very expensive. So that might be where you're looking for cards that say, just place those in. And when you're just placing them in, you're not suffering that cost penalty to put them in. And so you're looking for cards to kind of get you into places you couldn't normally get in, and then you kind of go on top of that to try and, really swing some influence. The other major thing that you're going to do is the support checks. So with the support checks, you're going to find an area that has some of your opponent's stuff in it, and you're going to roll dice to see if that support wanes or if nothing happens, basically. So your opponent has to have something in there. So if we're the liberal player, let's say we're looking at Trieste. That's what we'll do here. That's probably a terrible idea. It is, so we won't do that one. Let's look at Paris. Paris will be fun. Will it be, though? So, what you're going to do is you're going to roll a dice, and you're going to have a series of modifiers, and if you roll high enough, it's going to remove a bunch of their support, and may even place your own, which can be very cool. So, the target number for what you're trying to roll is double the control value. So for Paris, it's only a 4. Whereas for the French Catholic Church, for example, it would be an 8. And you have to exceed that target number, and the difference by which you exceed it is the change that's going to happen. So trying to take over like the Catholic Church or the armies, which are like 4s, Switzerland monarchy is a 5. Those things are very, very, very difficult. It's going to be very, very difficult to affect any kind of change there. But numbers where it's really low, so workers, farmers, the Parisian government, anytime you have like the intellectuals and journalists, those are very easy to kind of put some money into there, put some influence on there, lean on them really hard, and they'll kind of flip-flop. But, and we'll kind of show this here, it's very easy for them to flip-flop back because of this extremely low target number. So, what does it look like? So I'm going to be the liberal player. I'm trying to wrest control of Paris back to myself. So my target number is 4. To that, I'm going to add the number of adjacent areas that I control, which is Dijon and French Writers and Picardy. So I'm going to add 3 to my roll, but I'm also going to subtract opposition control that's adjacent. So Fauvism, French Army, and the French Catholic Church. So that's actually a wash, but I'm also going to add the ops value of the card. When you play this card to do support checks, you can only ever do 2 support checks. But to that, you add the value of the card as a modifier. So really it's a d6 plus 3, because all the other modifiers kind of washed out, basically. So we're going to roll a d6 plus 3, and I rolled a 5, and we're looking at the target number is 4, so there is a difference of 1, and so for the difference, you remove opposing support that amount. So we're only going to remove 1, and that goes down to 2. Difference here is 2, so now we control this again. Now, that was a really bad roll. If I'd rolled something like a 6, I've got a 9, this is a 4. What you're going to do is you're going to remove that difference of 5. You're going to remove opposing support, and then we've still got some left. So that was 3 would have been removed. I've still got 2 left. I would add support until I control this space. Well, I already control it, so I don't actually add any more. And that's the thing with something like Fauvism. if I had rolled here and I've got a 9, I'm going to remove 2. I don't add 7. You only ever add 1. So it's, these smaller spaces are really easy to flip-flop back again, and those will have very interesting plays on them before scoring happens, because you're like, that's the easy pickings. I can pick up a couple of these, bam, hit them with a scoring card. But it's going to be temporary, that's going to be removed, because the flip-flops so strongly. These big, tough ones, you have to have all these adjacency things, which it's hard to get, and then maybe a really good modifier, and even then it's kind of a crapshoot. So you got to be really careful about how and when you do those ones, or if you even bother attempting them at all. But, this was kind of a waste in the sense that I didn't get to add a whole bunch. If you can go to places like Vienna, enroll here, the target numbers are 6, but if I can get 6 plus a couple of adjacency bonuses, again, those are cancelled out here, but if I had 3 or 4, and then I'm plus 3, I'm going to be a D6 plus 5 or 6 to get over a 6. That's pretty good. I might be able to remove them and add a bunch if I roll well. So picking your battles with those can be really, really interesting. It's one of the cool things about this game. But that's the 2 things that you do on your turn. The only other thing that you would do is you have an off-map card, which is the Naval Arms Race. You roll a die, you play a card into it, and then if you meet the target number with your modifiers, you kind of go up on the track, and there's bonuses to get. The important part of that is that a lot of those bonuses are cancelled out once the other player reaches you, right? It's a naval arms race. When you're equal, no one's got an advantage. When you're ahead, you have an advantage. But when they catch up, the advantage is gone. Really, really cool like that. But it also acts like the space race. And what I mean by that is, if I'm the liberal player, and I got all these awful authoritarian cards in my hand, like this one here, I can put that's the card I use in the naval arms race. Great. It's got a really good bonus on it, but also playing it into that negates this event, which normally would trigger for the opponent. So it's your way to kind of trash really bad cards that can hurt you. And there's a couple of abilities here which allow you to do a second one in here, which can be really strong to keep those events away from your opponent. It functions very similarly like you would imagine to to Twilight Struggle. The big major difference is that there kind of is an end game here, where once the tension track goes up and you've got all these alliances made on the Great War track, every so often a card is going to make you make a crisis roll, and if you make a roll with the modifiers, you add your tension, you subtract the Great War status. If it's above a 6, World War I happens, and you resolve World War I, and it is it's very abstract. Basically take a whole bunch of modifiers from all of the alliances that you've made, and from all of the territories that you have and who's on your side, and then you basically have a little bit of a roll-off with modifiers. It's very simple, because fighting the war isn't important in this. The important part is the outcome. If you win, you get a bunch of support, and the opponent loses a bunch of support, basically. And if you lose, you just lose a whole bunch of stuff, and the winner wins a whole bunch of stuff. And so then you're basically so you just redraw the map basically based on the outcome of the war, and then you depending on when the war happens, you've got to then fight your Georgian era turns and stuff. The last couple hands, the scorings are going to be wild. So it's just very, very interesting how that aspect works, where you're kind of playing in normal game, and then there's this huge event that happens. And if you guys are kind of neutral in the middle, whoever's going to win the war is going to have a fairly significant advantage. But if somehow someone's kind of far ahead and they lose the war, it's going to pull them right back in, and you're going to be right back into this game. Or if you're ahead and you win, it's probably going to seal that victory. But the war usually happens fairly late on in the game anyway, in which case it was probably already decided. So it kind of just... I feel like it can shorten the game because it's going to hasten the victory fairly quickly. but it also kind of, it's all of this tension and build up, and you have a crescendo in it, which is nice. It's nice to have that in a game. So that's basically the core of what this game is. If you played Twilight Struggle, if you played 1989, this is effectively the same thing. The one very, very cool aspect that's different to both of those is when you play a scoring card, before you do any of the scoring, each of you has an asymmetrical hand of stability cards, and you don't draw from them. You just have all 10 to start the game with. You choose one of these to play. Let's say, I'm going to do the Naval Law Amendment. I'm going to play that, and my opponent's going to play one. Whoever the reactive player is, plays theirs first and resolves it, and then that person plays and resolves it. And these can do a number of things. So my one says, if German Navy is currently behind on the naval arms race track, make a 2-ops naval arms race attempt. So you just get a free chance on that naval track to kind of get back in. A little bit of a catch up there. All right, that one's fairly simple, but some of them, it's if you control the monarch space, if we're in Paris, it's the government space because they don't have a monarch. But if you're in Russia, if you control Tsar Nicholas II, if you control that and at least one other government, army, or annex space in the scoring region, you gain 2 VPs. So you've got ways to pick up extra victory points. Or some of them were like, if you control, a bunch of farmers and workers, you can place 2 influence. And placing 2 influence is significant. Especially because you're doing it just before you're scoring. It's that last little kind of slip the tablecloth out from under you kind of thing. But then the opponent has their chance to kind of react to that. Hopefully they played a sensible card. And so you get into this tiny little bit of kind of bluffing and kind of playing cards off each other. Really, really like it. You just play the one card. You kind of do it all. But it really can change the face of how things score. You thought this was a sure thing. Maybe they play a card that adds a couple, and your one relied on you maintaining a couple that were taken from you to springboard a bonus to really hammer that, and now it's kind of like a bit more even. You're like, maybe it wasn't as opportune as I thought it was going to be. Really, really love that aspect of it. At first, it was like, okay, this is just it's kind of like an extra step. But the more we played it, and the more it really influenced how the scoring went, you're like, this is really important. And it's considering it's just playing one card, it's very, very cool. I like it very much. So that's how the game works. What we'll do is we'll wrap up here with a few final thoughts. So that was a look at the map. One of the things that we didn't show you, didn't talk about yet, is this little mobilization deck. And by little, I mean it's quite big. Yeah. So what you can do, optionally, before you start the game, and they only recommend this for kind of experienced players. You played this 2 or 3 times.
I would have not wanted to play this on our first play because, to me, it was too much.
Yeah, that's why I was like, we're just not going to touch it. Yeah. But basically, instead of the normal resolution of the Great War, where you just kind of like add up your alliance modifiers, chuck some dice, and then like do all this influence change, basically there's a bunch of cards that correspond to each different nation on the board. And so you get all the ones that belong to you and your alliance. So I'm like, I've got Germany, I've got Austria-Hungary, and I had Italy at the time.
And Russia.
And I had Russia at the time. So hypothetically, I'm going to get all of their cards, and I choose one card from each nation. Yep. So Germany can have one of their 5 cards or whatever. And basically, they all have a number on them. And then everyone places them all out, and you just go in ascending order, and you do whatever it says on them. And some of them it's like, put a bunch of influence out, do a whole bunch of this, do a whole bunch of that, and it's
remove all SP from Constantinople.
Yes, and you do
would be very key.
It's like one last blast. You do all this stuff, and then whoever wins this immediately, like the game ends, and I think the winner is declared right then and there. Yeah. So it's a way to like make it so that that's the climax. Yep. And you're done with it. Yeah. It's like a whole extra little mini game you play at the end.
And really, these cards, they're very cool. When you look at them, it's like, ooh, this is so effective in so many different ways and situations. And I like that I would be able to choose from those 5 cards. Oh, I control Britain. Oh, I'm going to take this one because this is really going to mess with Italy, who is on your side. Yeah. So I think that's very cool.
Yeah, it's just that is a neat little bolt-on that you can do that's probably going to shorten the game.
I would agree.
It's basically, as soon as the Great War kicks off, this takes 5-10 minutes, and then it's done. But the game's over.
Yeah.
So your game's probably going to be more like 7 or 8 turns instead of the full 10 if you were going to go that far.
Which, based on our comments earlier in the first part of the video about the negative effects of losing that Great War, this is really going to be that coup de grace and end it, so you don't continue it.
Yeah, because it's either going to be real tense because you have good, strong alliances and it's kind of even. And you're like, I have no idea.
Yeah,
and it's or one side's got it real heavy and they're going to have 4 or 5 cards and you're going to have 1 or 2 and it's going to be like, we'll just call it good.
Yep.
So that just was just a note that is in this as well, and you can use that too. And it was very interesting to we didn't play with it. But I read through the rules, and we kind of just explored it afterwards of what would have happened if we'd have done that.
I think next time we probably will play with it. Because I think it is kind of nifty.
Just to try it out, and it's, why not? It's in there.
And it adds some variety to the game. Because you're going to control different countries with your alliances depending on what happened. I would do several things very differently, and that's what I love about these strategy games.
Yes.
You're going to play it, you're going to learn, you're going to grow and understand better what I'm supposed to be doing and should be doing.
You're going to memorize the cards, you're going to remember things like, oh, the authoritarian player has the one that just, takes control of Italy.
Yeah.
And so you're like, just got to watch out for that bad boy.
Yep.
And I'm sure there might be one that takes it away, or if they join...
Yeah.
The ally, the Entente, well, who knows?
So that card that takes control of Italy, to me, is very similar to the Cuban... revolution.
It's that style card,
and it's like you've got to know it can come out. You've got to know when it can come out, because if it's going to come out, you're not going to invest in that.
Yeah, don't do it until that's been played, and then you're like, sweet, now I can dump a bunch.
Or you're going to invest in Italy quickly, just to get that extra bonus 1 point when France scores, and then just don't worry about it. So. Knowing the cards is going to help you play these games, just like Twilight Struggle. Yeah. We've played that enough that now it's been a while since we've played. I'm going to have to play it again to kind of get back into
it. But I know, there's the Russian 5-year plan coming up. There's all this kind of stuff. You know some of the things that can happen to you.
So overall, I really like this. I think there's a lot of depth here. I think there's a lot of hidden depth that you're gonna need to understand through multiple plays. I really like the additions, like the stability deck and the symbols. I just think it adds another layer to it, and it makes a great game even better. I also liked that there are 14 spaces on that naval arms race space.
Yeah,
that was cool.
A lot of variety on that of things that can happen.
And at first I was like, I'm glad I played my card there that gave me the +1, because it really helped me. I needed to do it more effectively. But I really liked this. What did you not like about the game? We talked about this several times.
Sure. It's the age-old classic that's meaningless to a lot of people out there, but it's the graphic design was the thing that I really struggled with. And it's because a lot of the central areas of the map are very dark or grey. Or light
tannish brown.
Or a drab olive. And so the backgrounds of the countries kind of merge together. Which isn't necessarily inherently a problem, but some the way that some of the regions are kind of intermixed, and some of those, it's just we're scoring Germany. We almost forgot East Prussia because of where it's located, and it's kind of dark on a little background over here, kind of tucked away in Russia.
I'm not so sure why they didn't just draw some outline region. I don't know why they didn't do that.
Because the game's as abstract as it is, I don't care that it looks pretty. I want it to be
functional,
extremely functional.
Yeah,
and something like Twilight Struggle,
it's very functional.
It's not winning any awards for being pretty, but there is no mistaking which part is South Africa or South America, which part is Africa. Right.
The other part to me that was very confusing was the Battleground. They did that dual color. And to me, it just threw me off.
Yeah, you're looking at the dual color, and if you've got 2 markers on there, you forget what color the actual space is if it's part of the region.
It just, to me, it was confusing. I think, once again, like you said, they tried to make it good, but it ended up coming off as not functional. to me.
Yeah.
Or not easy to see. France, man, that stood out. That was easy to see.
Everything's blue. It's great. I know what I'm looking at.
Everything else, Germany. Everything's dark. It's very confusing to me. And
I just want it to be a bit more... I want it to be much stronger contrast.
Yes, agreed.
That way, I don't know. I'm not getting immersed in the flavor of the map. Yeah. That's not why I'm playing this game. Yeah. I want to be able to be like, this, and this.
Yep.
I don't have to puzzle it out and be like, oh yeah, that area, and this one. It's like, boom, there, we're done.
Some of the markers that coincided with specific events also I thought were a little bit confusing.
Well, they're very small as well.
They're very small, very hard to see, and they don't stand out.
And there's a legend on the back which has...
It's just hard to see.
Which has the world's smallest writing.
I know.
I'm a young little whippersnapper.
I'm not.
I've got glasses. I can read those. But I'm like, have fun with that, everyone.
So I feel like where it failed was in the graphic presentation. I thought it could have been a little better. I thought these markers could have been bigger. I thought the spaces could have been clearer. But I appreciate what they were trying to do. This, and you even mentioned it, this period of time was kind of grandiose and flamboyant, and people were wearing uniforms with peacock feathers and plumes and flowing cloaks and robes.
I mean, look at these dudes.
Swords.
Look at these dudes.
These should have been more colorful.
Because it's the lead up to that. This should have been, it's the last kind of hurrah before all of these empires crumble. This could have been a very bright, vibrant map. Instead, it's very dull, kind of in the mud blood and the...
I don't know that that's nitpicky, because I think graphic design is a huge part of why we do like certain games and styles. But overall, the game plays well.
Yeah,
it's deep. It's thematic. I think that's a small part, but I think it could have made this game that much better. Personally,
the game was totally fine, stands on its own legs. It was an enjoyable game to play.
Yeah,
it was, but
not when you're getting destroyed. But that's my problem.
Sure, but
more often than not, I play these games. I want to win, but when I don't, it's like, okay, we learned, we had a good time. This one, man, it bothered me. It bothered me.
Well, because some games you're like, this is not it's a historical scenario. I meant to kind of lose. It's fine. I'm at peace with that.
East Front games, right?
Sure, or like
a lot of the World War I games that we've been playing,
or World War II Poland games. We all know what's going to happen.
We know it's a foregone conclusion.
Yeah, but sometimes when you get a drubbing in a game that's like a 2-player EVA game, you're like,
I feel like you took me out to behind the woodshed. That was behind the woodshed, and you clubbed me with like a mace with nails sticking out of it. Or a club with nails sticking out of it.
Rusty nails.
Rusty nails.
You survived, but died of tetanus 3 weeks later.
Right, and it's just like, I'm still smarting. I'm going to go home tonight, and I'm going to be crying myself to sleep. And that's okay. Maybe I'll sleep better this evening. But congratulations. You kicked the crap out of me.
Thank you.
I'm going to, you son of a... Anyway, had a good time with it. I feel like this is a very different game than the other World War I games that we've been playing in this event.
Yeah.
And I appreciated that.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad we threw it in. Everything else has generally been hex encounter and
area control and stuff. This one's much more abstract. I'm sure people are going to argue over whether or not it is a war game. So have fun with that.
I think we would say that Twilight Struggle and these type of games necessarily aren't war games.
Twilight Struggle is definitely not a war game.
I don't know.
This one culminates in a war that you do play out, but again, it's
the same principle.
It's not what it's about. It's about
the influential struggle,
ideological influence, which is not a war game. But this is a style of game that if you like Twilight Struggle,
you're gonna like it.
You will like it straight up.
Yep. If you like historical war games or historical games, that have so much history on these cards. I mean, these are all events. These are all personalities.
And they do the thing that I absolutely love in these games. Everything's a historical photo.
Yep.
I cannot stress to you how much I like that in a game.
Yep.
I love it.
Well, and it also explains who these people are. Georges Clemenceau.
He was a French prime
minister. I don't know that I knew all that, but it's all there.
I grew up in Europe.
I know.
But yeah,
I'm an American.
Yeah, but I don't know. With the CDGs, you have all this extra real estate, And there are games where they just like put some clip art on there or put nothing, and it's
We've seen
frankly
that.
unforgivable.
Yeah.
But they do such a good job.
Yeah.
Especially this period is great. Because I think the stately portraits are always fascinating and very narcissistic, but you also
look at the front of the. All you got to do is look at the front of the cover. It's all right there. The whole gamut is right there. Flowers, peacocks, medals that they didn't earn,
the wars they never fought,
banners. I mean, it's all there. So anyway,
and you get like
very cool.
the newspaper clippings, the little propaganda pieces.
Yep.
That's the first,
the cartoons,
the first-hand historical sources that we'll study in schools and in history books.
Right here, there's some
incredible. I love it, and so having that extra layer just brings it to life to me, and that's what I really want in a game at this scale of what it's doing. I want to get immersed in. Oh, this card is like, oh, it's this thing, and here's the little newspaper clipping for it. It gives you that extra little tiny bit of morsel of flavor, which I really, really do appreciate.
Agreed
As well. So, Europe in Turmoil from Compass Games.
I'd recommend this game pretty highly if you like Twilight Struggle. I really would.
Understand it is that style of game, and if you like it, this is probably going to be something you will enjoy. There's no reason that you wouldn't, at least.
Yeah.
So, appreciate you guys tuning in. I've been Alexander from thePlayerSaid.com.
And I'm Crying Grant. Thank you.